περάσουμε τώρα στο επόμενο θέμα, το οποίο αφορά στην ομιλία με αφορμή την παρουσίαση του βιβλίου του καθηγητή Geoffrey Robertson με τίτλο Who Wants History. Ο κύριος Robertson έκανε ιστορικές αναφορές στο θέμα της αρπαγής των μαρμάρων του Παρθενώνα από τον Έλγιν. Την εκδήλωση διοργάνωσαν το Greek Press Association UK. Στο βίντεο που ακολουθεί θα σας παρουσιάσουμε ένα απόσπασμα από την ομιλία του κύριου Robertson.
The long work began of getting back colonial acquisitions, material, cultural property that has been stolen, sometimes in the most barbaric conditions, sometimes by putting women and children and artists to the sword, and yet has not been returned from Western museums. A prime example, of course, are the Parthenon marbles. It was here, actually, that we took the first case. It was against the Natural History Museum, which had refused to repatriate human bones and skulls that had been taken in grave robbing expeditions by British soldiers in the 19th century from Tasmania. And it was that case. I went with Mark Stevens to the Natural History Museum, and we found these skeletons that had been robbed from graves for ornamenting Victorian mantelpieces in cardboard boxes, in shoe boxes. And the museum was about to take them out and subject them to some genetic mutilation, some tests, DNA testing, having had them there for a century. And, of course, without the permission of the descendants of these poor oppressed people. And we took them to court, and they stormed in with their counsel making perhaps the worst, most embarrassing comment ever. He said, "We're just going to cut them about a bit." To which I replied, "They're going to experiment on the bodies of victims of genocide, because the Tasmanian Aborigines were the victims of genocide." And that in the papers the next day did not go well with the donors to the museum, which was forced to mediate. And I have to say that as the result of a mediation between held by two Chief Justices of England and New South Wales, the museum accepted that it had been wrong to experiment on these bodies and wrong to refuse to repatriate them. And as a result, that was 10 years ago, a test case, and now the principle of restoring human remains to countries from which they've been stolen has been accepted by most museums. But now we have a different issue, the issue of cultural heritage. And it is the aim of this book to explain that it is wrong as a matter of international law not to return material and cultural heritage that has been wrongfully taken, no matter whether it was a century or 2 centuries ago. And the first example of that, of course, the Parthenon marbles. Now, I'm a lawyer. I've had to spend a lot of time looking at the documents, the original evidence of Lord Elgin's depredation. And I have no doubt at all that his was a case of theft. He went as British ambassador, but he lied to the select committee when he said he only took them to rescue them because he saw the Turks stealing them. That was a blatant lie, as I've been able to prove by showing that he was never there. He never went to Athens until his heist was largely accomplished. He said that he obtained what is called a firman, the license from the Sultan, which of course was necessary because the Ottomans were very careful about not allowing temples within their jurisdiction to be stripped. He didn't obtain anything of the sort. That was a lie that he and his assistant, his vicar, continued in to, and the select committee bought. They never had anything like a firman. There was a letter, but it was not from the Sultan. It was from a lower grade official, and it allowed him only to take molds, not to take anything off the temple. So tracking down the lies of Élgin, which have been perpetuated for 2 centuries by lies and half-truths from the British Museum, has been a major exercise in this book. But I think as a lawyer, international lawyer, I have managed to do so, to convict Élgin of theft. Of course, the British Museum changes its story. It's always relied on the firman theory until it was destroyed by a report that Amal Clooney and Professor, who was actually the great figure, we did a report a few years ago, and they changed their story. They changed it to, they invented a character called Mr. Rashid Aga, who they said was the senior official in Athens and who allowed Élgin, who gave permission to Élgin to remove the statues. This is put in black and white at the entrance to the Duveen Gallery where the statues are. It's a lie. I tracked down this official. He wasn't in Athens. He was a mere postboy in Istanbul who accompanied Élgin's clergyman as they went back with the letter of authorization, which only authorized the taking of mouldings. So this too, the latest story put up 2 years ago by the British Museum, is simply false. Élgin had the money. He was a very rich man. He had the money to buy the marbles. Why didn't he offer? Because he knew that his offer would not be accepted.
Αμέσως μετά το τέλος της ομιλίας του, λάβαμε την ευκαιρία να κάνουμε μια σύντομη συνέντευξη με τον συγγραφέα του βιβλίου, κύριο Robertson. Τη συνέντευξη πήρε η αγαπητή φίλη του σταθμού μας, Αλίκη Μιχαήλ.
Television, Mr. Robertson. Who owns history?
Well, a lot of people, Americans particularly, think that American billionaires own it because they buy it and they have it in their private homes and their gated communities. And when they die, they donate it for tax deduction reasons for their estate to the Gettys and the Metropolitan Museums of Art. But I think history belongs to those who make it and those who create it and those to whom it means most.
What prompted you to go down this route? You're a human rights lawyer, a renowned human rights lawyer. So what prompted you to go down the avenue of history in terms of items, in terms of artifacts?
Some unfinished business. I was instructed by the Greek government back in Mr. Papandreou's time to advise on the Élgin marbles. I found a lot of misunderstanding. I did my own research. I found so many lies, so many half-truths, so many wrong appreciations of Élgin, who I declared as a thief. He stole the marbles on any view. And so I always thought I would like, when the Greek government dropped the ball, it wasn't perhaps right for them. We did a report, heard nothing more about it. But I thought one day I will come back to this and I will publish the truth about the plunder, because that's what it was, of the Parthenon. And it happened that a very patriotic, philanthropic Greek, John Lefas, who is a businessman, international businessman, was very keen that I should do that, and he agreed to promote the book, not just to the British Parliament, but to the United Nations and to the General Assembly, where it must be, the argument must be heard. So he encouraged me, and I went back to writing it. And of course, while I was writing it, President Macron came out and said that the wrongfully taken cultural property of Africa should be returned from France. So that's another strong argument in the case.
How would you answer the British Museum, who thus far have not really played ball with regard to returning the marbles, which, as you quite rightly say, were plundered, not legally obtained? How has the museum reacted, A, to your book, but B, to you personally in doing all this research, and what has their reaction been?
They haven't had time to react. They've kept silent so far. I wait with interest because I do show in my book that their arguments for Élgin are simply false, and their latest argument, that he was given permission by Mr. Rashid Aga, is ridiculous. So, I engage with them on that point. But on the other hand, I say that they should keep the Rosetta Stone, which was actually did its miracle while it was in the museum. It was deciphered while it was there. There are 17 other copies, but the marbles are unique. And I think the best case is probably visual. I start my pictures with, first of all, a picture of the new Acropolis Museum with the marbles and the Parthenon looking down. And then I compare it to this miserable dark gallery in North London dedicated to Joseph Devine, who was an art fraudsman. So that is, I think, makes the point. That these are, look, for me, this is more, I'm not Greek, although I'm Australian, which means I'm part Greek. There are a lot of Greeks in Australia. But I think, for me, this is an amazing, the frieze is the most important work of art in the world, because it shows the first people who were democrats celebrating peace. It is a celebration of peace. People are walking, talking, drinking. Drinking is, I'm glad to say, very important, and feasting. And they are human values. And the value, this was what humanity was able to achieve in 440 BC, the first example of civilization. And it's like an old black and white movie that you can suddenly see of our first civilization. And the British Museum, by denying the return, is like tearing a picture in half. So I don't think that the British Museum has the ethics on their side. And I hope that the law will soon be against them as well.
On that point of the law, according to your very deep research, you say that it would be possible to actually go to court to repatriate the marbles.
Yes.
Is there a reason why that might not have already taken place?
No. It could have taken place a few years ago when the report that I wrote with Amal and with Norman Palmer was produced. But nothing happened. I think something could still happen because the Greek government got 105 nations in the General Assembly to support it last year. That's all it takes to get a reference to the... But some Greek politicians appear to be nervous they would rather have this platform of complaining than perhaps run the risk of losing. But I don't think Pericles would have taken that attitude.
Well, because I suppose losing is then finite. It should it be lost?
No,
whereas
it's
now
not.
there is always an open opportunity.
Well, there's not, because the British government is adamant. It won't even mediate.
Yes.
Unless Jeremy Corbyn is elected.
In which case you believe that he would, well, he's already said,
Yes.
that he would return the marbles.
Yes, so any Greek industrialist who believes in getting the marbles back should support Labour.
Are you in favour of all artefacts wrongly obtained to be returned to their
I have a chapter showing the distinctions that should be made. The Egyptians want the Rosetta Stone back. I say no, it should stay. Stay where it was deciphered. Stay where the magic was discovered.
Ολόκληρη την ομιλία του κύριου Ρόμπερτσον θα σας την παρουσιάσουμε προσεχώς στην εκπομπή με το φακό του Hellenic TV.